The word of the week has become racism. Marcia Langton has said she believes the No campaign is driven by racist ideas and that some people who are racist are drawn to the No campaign's rhetoric. Does she have a point that there are some people in Australia who are racist who are going to vote no?
And there's going to be some racists who vote yes too. And I mean, the way I viewed it is that racism is the problem for the racist. It should never have become the number one issue for us as Indigenous Australians, because we have issues that are actually leading to the deaths of people, vulnerable people. With vulnerable people living in horrible circumstances in remote communities. The minute that racism became, the most popular word is when we forgot about all those other issues. And I mean, I've been racially vilified by the Yes campaign. Somehow people think it's okay to call an Aboriginal person an Uncle Tom or a coconut, or, suggest that we are the coloured help. And people who throw stones in glass houses need to be careful, because when they point the finger, three are pointing back at them. And while there are those that make such accusations on one side, they have to realise that, they're not accounting or taking any responsibility for what's going on their side of the fence. And again, this referendum is incredibly divisive. The topic of race has never been so prominent in our nation's dialogue than what it is now because of this referendum. So Prime Minister Anthony Albanese needs to take some responsibility for that.
If I cast my mind forward to what the Voice might look like, I'm imagining, 24 people meeting in Canberra 4 times a year, handing up papers to Parliament. What do you imagine? What do you envisage that this might be like if it gets passed?
Well, that's just it, isn't it? It's an imaginary thing right now. There is no detail. This government doesn't know what in fact it will look like, how it will operate, who will occupy the positions on the Voice. It is all up to our imagination as to what this Voice would possibly look like. My deepest concern is that given that the most radical members of the Voice working group that have sat alongside our Prime Minister have declared that they would weaponise this entity to punish politicians, no doubt, like myself, like my colleague Karen Little, our leader Peter Dutton, to punish those of us who don't agree with them, who challenge them, who question them, then this is something that some people see as a vehicle for weaponisation. There have been demands thrust upon the Australian people by these same activists about abolishing Australia Day, about compensation, about reparations. Of course, there are those with those agendas, and this is a mechanism that they would have the opportunity to be part of, a transfer of power through our Constitution, and that is the most concerning part. Now, we can be labelled, fear-mongers or spreading misinformation or disinformation. Well, if we don't actually have any information whatsoever, what can actually be misinformation or disinformation? So that is where we're at with this. It is deeply concerning, and certainly those proponents of the Voice do not express the same priorities as I do. They are not interested in what is going on in remote communities for Aboriginal people whose first language is not English, who are suffering the highest rates of domestic and family violence, of our children are suffering the highest rates of sexual abuse. They are not concerned for those matters. They're concerned with the activist agenda.
Voice is successful. You and your colleagues will be among the members of Parliament voting on the specific design of it. What approach are you going to take?
The least destructive possible entity that we can attempt to convince the Labor government to design. That is what we will be working toward, ensuring this model is least destructive for our most marginalised, and that it considers the well-being of all Australians, not just Indigenous Australians.
Please Please join me in thanking Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa Price.